South Africans, reeling from the 9 days of wanton looting and destruction in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, are both cleaning up and demanding answers. Now, more than 45,000 businesses are claiming their cost of stock, with the damage to infrastructure alone expected to exceed 20 billion rand. The insurrection, or indeed the attempted coup, is calculated to have cost the GDP more than 50 billion. As the smoke clears from the looting and burning of 100 malls, the big question being asked is, who is to blame? Now, all eyes are turning to the security cluster, the SAPS, state security, and the Defence Force. The entire nation read the threatening posts flying over social media, giving dates and venues for various protests and invasions days in advance. Yet, to quote the Minister for Defence, they were caught with their pants down. Specialized cybercrime units do exist, but seemingly did nothing, or if they did, their information was not acted upon. As the security cluster ministers continue to throw each other under the flaming blame game bus, so more and ever more elaborate conspiracy theories are introduced. What Parliament must do is pin down the truth, apportion the blame, and ensure that our security services are never again seen to be absent, unaware, or deliberately standing back. Was it an attempt at a coup or an insurrection? It was certainly coordinated by highly trained experts, or was it? Could it simply have been a groundswell explosion of fury after years of service delivery failure? Or was it indeed a group of individuals, 12 have allegedly been pinpointed, who scripted the entire uprising because of a political campaign? Over 300 people are dead and heading for 3,500 arrested. There are questions our nation needs answers to, and many of these seem to coalesce around ANC factional battles. The reality is that to ensure credibility of this process, indeed to ensure public support that the outcome has been properly determined, this process cannot in any manner be seen as allowing attempts to save ANC careers or even protect certain members of individual factions within that political party. This will be a parliamentary inquiry, not a judicial commission of inquiry, but certainly the final report may propose such, as it may well propose criminal investigations or the overall intervention of the NPA. Today, as members of the DA Shadow Security Cluster, we want to outline our expectations of such an inquiry. First of all, we hand over to the Shadow Minister of Justice, Glynis Breitenbach.
Thanks, Diane. As the public and members of the media will know, on the 27th of July, House Chairperson Cedric Frolick wrote a letter in which he ordered that a parliamentary inquiry be established into the recent violent insurrection. He suggested that the inquiry be led by the Portfolio Committee on Police and other relevant committees in the Peace and Stability Cluster from both houses. A preliminary meeting was held on Friday, the 30th of July, consisting of the Police, Justice and Correctional Services and the Defence and Military Veterans Committees of the National Assembly, the Joint Standing Committees of Defence and of Intelligence, and the Select Committee for Security and Justice of the National Council of Provinces. At this meeting, which was chaired by the Honourable Tina Jumat-Peterson, it was clear that proper parliamentary procedure and rules were not followed. It is deeply concerning, considering the magnitude of the task ahead of such a committee. The DA will be writing to the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the NCOP to outline our expectations of the parliamentary inquiry. After our meeting on Friday, in terms of Joint Rule 138, an ad hoc joint committee seemed to be the most feasible way forward. But then its formation must be subject to Joint Rule 138, which specifies that such a committee may only be informed by a resolution adopted by both houses, or if both or any of the houses are in recess, by decision of the Speaker and the Chairperson, acting jointly after consulting the Chief Whips of the majority party in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. The houses are indeed in recess, and the process contemplated in Rule 138B has not taken place. For that reason, and because the documentation has been received shortly before the meeting, it was decided not to proceed with it. It is assumed that Joint Rule 138 will be the basis of the constitution of the ad hoc committee to deal with this inquiry. But we suggest that in addition to consulting the Chief Whips of the majority party, the consultation process is extended to include the Chief Whips, perhaps by convening the Chief Whips Forum. This will ensure the buy-in of all. Additionally, to convene a meeting of all the committees specified above will mean that the inquiry will be conducted by a large number of MPs. This makes it difficult to engage In the sort of cross-questioning that is necessary in an inquiry of this sort, we suggest that a formula be found for reducing the number of members of the ad hoc committee to a manageable size. Finally, an inquiry into the possible serious lapses by the security forces can scarcely be led by the Portfolio Committee on Police and its chairperson. There is always the danger of a cover-up, or at very least the perception of one. Any perception of the police investigating themselves should be avoided at all costs. Anything less will detract significantly from the value of such an important inquiry. Accordingly, we suggest that it would serve to enhance the credibility if the chairperson of the ad hoc committee was drawn from the ranks of the opposition parties. It is further suggested, in the interest of transparency, that the lead be taken by the Justice Committee.
Thank you, Glynis. And now, as the Shadow Minister of State Security, I'll run through what we see as the issues that need unpacking by the Commission. Now, much of the finger pointing for those responsible for the catastrophic failure of our security cluster in relation to the enormously damaging insurrection, which cost KZN and Gauteng billions of rands in damages, in cash, in jobs, and in global reputation. The blame game has targeted both state security and SAP's crime intelligence specifically for failing to predict and dampen the threat before it exploded. The reality is the fuse was lit at least 7 days before the shooting started, and there seems to have been zero reaction or preparation via these entities. So to focus on state security, there have been disruptive factors at play within state security and the entire state security milieu for well over a year leading up to this week of looting and destruction, which with hindsight may well have played into the failure of this entity to do the job expected of them. From the state security / crime intelligence and defense intelligence side, the following questions, amongst many others, must be asked and answered. Did the public spats within the State Security Agency, the removal of the standing long-term acting head, Mr. Loyiso Jafta, and the reinstatement of Arthur Fraser's right-hand man, Mr. Graham Engel, after 3 years on suspension, not combine and contribute to a lack of focus on the part of this entity? Did the suspension of Foreign Intelligence head, Mr. Robert McBride, on the 8th of July, shortly before the attempted insurrection, lead to a breakdown in the information gathering system? Did the Minister of State Security, as she claims, indeed oversee the handing over of a report or reports which highlighted the oncoming insurrection attempt, and to whom? Were these reports of sufficient depth and quality to make the possibility of an attempted insurrection seen as a clear and present danger to our country? Should such intelligence reports from the SSA go directly to the Minister of Police, as he claims, or rather, as we've been told, to the NATJOINTS, the National Joint Operational Intelligence Structure, which is the operational arm of the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster? It is co-chaired by the National Police Commissioner, together with the Secretary of Defense. Now, at that level, would they not have had full sight and knowledge of such report or reports supplied by the State Security Agency? Did the National Police Commissioner then supply the information of the upcoming attempted insurrection to the Minister of Police? If not, why not? The Minister is claiming that all intelligence goes to his office first, although others claim it does not. The facts must be determined. Now, if it is so that it went directly to the NATJOINTS, what disciplinary procedures will be undertaken to ensure full investigation into the actions of these two top members within the security cluster? Now, if no such reports went to this body, then should the President then be requested to remove the Minister of State Security for claiming publicly that a file went from her offices detailing the plans for the attempted insurrection? Looking then at crime intelligence, the key figure here will be Lieutenant General Peter Jacobs. He was removed, as was the entire top structure of crime intelligence, by the National Police Commissioner at the end of last year. Now, General Jacobs was put in the inspectorate. General Jacobs would, I have no doubt whatsoever, have been in command of the situation. Unfortunately, the new head of crime intelligence for some 3 months, Lieutenant General Yolisa Mokabudi, was, it is claimed, absent after some 2 months in office from her post. No one seems to know why. Her appointment followed various other individuals who were slotted in after General Jacobs, all of whom faced internal probes. In they went, out they went, and then again, they put in another major general, pushed in when she disappeared, and all it was a bizarre situation that needs clarification. Now, unlike the succession of people who've been wafted through the position, General Jacobs would, we believe, have pointed out to the Minister that the event presented features of a hybrid attack, not a linear one. The organizers patently utilized small covert groupings, mobile groups, gangs. It was carefully planned and resourced and openly discussed on social media. Instead, crime intelligence was seemingly absent, and the question to be determined is why, and whether this was a deliberate strategy or not. Indeed, it was only later that the general reappeared and started demanding intelligence in order to search for the perpetrators. In that the president declared this a failed insurrection, one must ask where the National Police Commissioner's insurrection plan was. There are questions being asked as to whether or not he was perhaps distracted by his loss in the Supreme Court of Appeal, which left him guilty of being involved in the crime intelligence attempt to corruptly procure a 45 million rand grabber surveillance device before the ANC's elective conference at Nasrec in 2017. Now, what should perhaps be factored in to this is the fact that he was appointed by Jacob Zuma, and prior to that was Provincial Commissioner and ANC Secretary General Ace Makashule's Free State Province. It is being asked, was his inaction part of the action? Additionally, an answer must be obtained as to how some 35 trucks were burned in KZN with little or no police knowledge or intervention. This was at the very start of the attempted insurrection, yet no appreciable SAPS response was forthcoming, which either speaks to crime intelligence being unaware of the situation or that the SAPS were ignoring information fed to them by that entity. The Deputy Minister of State Security has claimed that it was all a plot run by experts, and he should be allowed to expound on this theory. Now, the role of former ambassador to Japan, Thulani Lomo, who went AWOL from the SSA after he was axed as ambassador and who's widely known as Zuma's personal spy, has been named as one of the 12 suspects behind this attempted insurrection. Now, where did that information come from that led to his arrest? From crime intelligence or from the State Security Agency? Were the other suspects found by one or the other? How many are today facing prosecution as determined by the NPA? It has been claimed that there are police and agents paid for by South Africa who are loyal not to this country, but only to Jacob Zuma. Now, this claim must be interrogated and determined to be true or false. Crime intelligence must determine whether or not there was SAP's involvement in the theft of the 1.5 million rounds of ammunition from the Durban harbour. Defence intelligence had, to our knowledge, little or no involvement in this domestic matter. However, it is argued that they should also have been aware of the situation in that the integrity of the country, of the very country, was under threat. Now, these are some of the broad stroke questions which the inquiry must ask and be answered, after which heads must roll, and indeed the NPA must deal with others. I'll hand over now to the Shadow Minister of Police, Andrew Whitfield.
Thank you very much, Diane. The failure of SAPS to prevent and contain the insurrection is undoubtedly one of the biggest failures of the police service since the dawn of democracy. The inquiry must therefore establish the exact whereabouts of the minister and the National Police Commissioner in the days leading up to the insurrection and the reasons for their apparent absence during the insurrection, as well as what, if any, preemptive steps they took to curtail or prevent the insurrection. The Commission must appoint an independent organization to verify SAPS's findings into all 300 plus deaths resulting from the insurrection and the violence associated with it, not just those in Phoenix. It must invite all stakeholders involved in the stolen ammunition shipment, from the freight forwarding agency to importers, customs, and the South African Police Service, to present to the inquiry. Due to the theft of firearms from SAP stations, this inquiry must commission an independent security audit of all police stations in the country to identify security shortcomings. The SAPS Inspectorate should also conduct its own investigation. This commission must work to identify SAPS and other state officials who, through their actions or their inactions, may have been complicit in the violent unrest associated with the insurrection. It has been claimed that there was an order given to stand back and not attempt to apprehend the looters. This claim must be fully interrogated. We must establish causes for the shortages of rubber bullets, live ammunition, and other critical resources required to quell such an insurrection. Indeed, there are reports that civilians were giving the South African Police Service members ammunition, which seems extraordinary in the face of SAPS's 100 billion rand budget. In that it is claimed that vital information about the upcoming insurrection went directly to the Nat joints, it must be determined whether the National Police Commissioner did or did not keep this information to himself. If it is established that he did not, if reports went through to the Minister of Police, then the President should be requested to remove the minister for claiming publicly that he knew nothing and was given no information in terms of the plans for this attempted insurrection.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrew. It's now over to the Shadow Minister of Defence, Kobus Marais.
Unmute.
Kobus,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diane. Rakende die verpligtinge van moet die minister van verdediging baie van die skuld dra. Ons weet die volgende feite. Sy het erken sy is totaal onkant gevang met die omvang van die opstande en die oproer en dit glad nie verwag nie. On the one hand, she may have received very poor intelligence, which implies that there's a very big problem within the intelligence agencies, including state security, crime intelligence, and defense intelligence. This may be due to the involvement of the agencies in the ANC factional fighting and/or that they are simply too weak to gather any credible intelligence and make it available to the executive in time. Sy het dalk anderzijds die regte inligting ontvang, maar omdat sy nie die inligting en die agente geglo het nie, het sy besluit om nie betyds daarop te reageer nie. She seems to have relied on intelligence which was different from that available to the president, which clearly came out with her public remarks that repudiated the president about the characteristics and the nature of the insurrection efforts and riots. The minister in the presidency made it clear that the president is being advised by the Defence Force leaders and not the Minister of Defence. As the DA, we have been calling for the minister's head to roll, and this blatant contradiction to the president reiterates her incompetency and the need for fresh, competent leadership. Wanneer daar sulke ooglopende verskille in die uitvoerende gesag is, beteken dit niks goed vir die weermag ontplooiing, bekamping van onrus en oproer en beleggers vertroue nie. Die rede, aard en modus operandi van die opstande en oproer in KwaZulu-Natal en Gauteng het duidelik sterk verskil van mekaar en die intelagentskappe behoort dit betyds uit te gewys het. Apart from the fact that the minister was initially reluctant to ask for army deployment, the initial number of 2,500 at the national level was completely inadequate. With pressure from the DA and the Joint Standing Committee on the Defence, the deployment of 25,000 soldiers was eventually approved. With the initial deployment of the larger group, poor organization with regards to logistics was experienced, poor planning and provision of accommodation, food, and especially fuel supplies. This was fortunately rectified. The army was also by no means trained for domestic deployments, especially for the challenges and dangers we have experienced in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Daar moet ernstig na die geskiktheid van die minister gekyk word om die weermag te lei en die president te dien wanneer daar sulke opstande en onrus is. Daar moet koelkop en sonder emosies opgetree word sodat die beste besluite vir Suid-Afrika geneem kan word. The deployment exposed the serious shortage of strategic resources for the military, especially the inadequate budget. With a DA intervention, an additional 700 million was allocated to the Defence Force specifically for Operation Prosper. These events and exposures now provide the ideal opportunity to reposition, reprioritize, and equip the military, including the correct budget, for current and future security challenges, including deploying the military domestically. Met 'n nuwe hoof van die weermag en 'n nuwe hoof van gesamentlike operasies kan 'n nuwe strategiese rigting makliker ingeslaan word as met ou leiers wie moeiliker afwyk van ou gewoontes. I must admit and give credit where it is due. The defense leadership responded very positively when I contacted them with threatening intelligence, and the presence of the Defence Force made a significant impact in curbing the insurrection and thuggery. I'm not aware of one incident where the soldiers misbehaved against civilians such as in 2020, and they must be commended for that. I thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Cobus. Over now to George Mikalakis, a member of the Select Committee on Security and Justice in the National Council of Provinces.
Thank you, Diane. From the perspective of the NCOP, we want to reiterate the following points. The DA in the NCOP supports the establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate the events that took place in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. The NCOP co-chairperson of the ad hoc committee must be a member of the opposition. In establishing the NCOP component of the committee, we insist that the chairperson of the NCOP must take into account, firstly, representation from all provinces, and secondly, proportional representation of all parties represented in the Security Cluster Committee in the spirit of participatory democracy. This is entirely achievable due to the proportional composition of the respective provincial delegations. We furthermore strongly recommend that the establishment of the NCOP component be done through engagement with the whips committee, which includes whips from all parties and the provincial whips. And finally, that the report with the findings and recommendations must serve before both houses upon completion. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, George, and to all our colleagues for their inputs. Now, it is clear that there are many expectations of a parliamentary inquiry. South Africans do deserve answers and reassurances that this will never happen again. Indeed, on the 10th of this month, the former President Zuma's trial will resume, and the security cluster must be ready and prepared to deal with any possible criminal activities in this regard. Already, we're seeing posters flying through social media. Now, the false start of this inquiry, as Glynis explained, does not fill one with confidence in Parliament and its ability to adequately get to the bottom of the insurrection. And we urge the Speaker of the National Assembly, the chairperson of the NCOP, and members who will eventually serve on this committee to take heed of the expectations set out here today. I thank you.